I think we are live already.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Anusha from Wilgrow. Welcome to day 3 of Unconvention 2021. Unconvention is Wilgrow's annual convening for social entrepreneurs, and this is our 12th year. The theme of Unconvention 2021 is remodeling for resilience, and for the first time, it is being hosted completely online. This year, Unconvention is a 3-day convening, and the days have been divided into sub-themes of building better, building bigger, and building meaningfully. There are multiple parallel panel discussions, fireside chats, masterclasses, and networking lounges taking place throughout the day, and some are even rather late in the evening due to the international nature of our audience. So we are starting our day with a session on democratization of data, building a digital data commons. And this session is being moderated by Hemendra Mathur, partner, Bharat Innovation Fund. So over to you, Hemendra.
Thanks, Anusha, and thanks to the Wilgrow team for this wonderful opportunity on a very, very important topic, democratization of data, building a digital data commons. And in this session, we'll be focusing on building an agri-stack, which many of you would be familiar with. A lot of people confuse it with the digitization of land records, but I can tell you it's much more than that. Digitizing farmer identities, farmland identities, and building data layers essentially to drive digitization of the agri value chain. Some of you must have heard me about me talking about AgriStack multiple times. I've written about it, I've spoken about it, but probably this is the first time I'm moderating a panel on this subject. So that's great. And I couldn't have asked for a better set of panelists than what I have today. And I'll take a minute to briefly introduce each one of them, though I don't think any one of them need introduction. So first of all, we have Mr. J. Satyanarayana. He's the ex-chairman, UIDAI, and he's chairing a working group set up by the Ministry of Agriculture, Government of India, on developing IDEA. IDEA is an abbreviation for India Digital Ecosystem of Agriculture. He's also working on a very important initiative called AI for AI, which is essentially AI for agriculture innovation, being jointly developed by C4IR India, which is a World Economic Forum initiative, in association with Government of Telangana. So, sir, a very warm welcome to you to the panel. Next one is Prashant Mehra. He's co-founder of Platform Commons Foundation. And I've known Prashant for some time. I think a true champion of digital platforms, AgriStack. And we look forward to hear from you, Prashant. Welcome to the panel.
Hi.
Next is Prateep Basu. He's the founder and CEO of SetSure. I've known Prateep for like more than 3 years now. He's someone who taught me about application of satellite imagery in agriculture, and since then it's been a great journey with him. So Prateep, a very warm welcome to you as well. And last but not the least, we have Kriti Mittal. She is entrepreneur in residence at Omidyar Network. And many of you would know Omidyar is doing some excellent piece of work in open digital ecosystem, and Kriti is part of a lot of discussions around AgriStack. So Kriti, welcome, a warm welcome to you as well. And just like I'll just take 2 minutes to set the context before we get into the discussion. The fundamental question: why do we need a digital platform? Why do we need an AgriStack? And of course, there have been a lot of debate and conversations in the last few years, I would say, around this topic. All I want to say that we have about 145 million farmers in the country. Most of them are small and marginal. 85% of the farmers are, in fact, the farmers which have less than 2 hectares of land. And the transaction cost of reaching out to these farmers, for a bank or for an agri input company or for a food processing company, is very high. And that's why a lot of these farmers remain excluded financially and also from a market perspective. And that's where a digital stack make a lot of sense. And of course, it can be used by the government for doing for carrying out a lot of farmer welfare schemes like DBT, etc. But more importantly, by the ecosystem, the banks who want to finance farmers, the insurance companies who want to do crop insurance, and also to a lot of startups, a lot of agri-tech startups who are working in this area. I think it can really spur a lot of innovations. What India Stack did to fintech, potentially an AgriStack can do that to agri-tech. of course, we'll discuss the various aspects of it. And of course, there are challenges around it. In terms of the data, it's lying at multiple government departments. Some data is physical, some data is digital, some data is not fully updated. We also have large share of sharecroppers, tenant farmers, lease farmers who migrate from one field to another field. So there is an element of dynamicity in agri-stack, unlike in DESTAC. So yes, we'll discuss about all this. And let me start with my first question to Mr. J. Satyanarayanan. Sir, how do you see IDEA platform is shaping up, and how it can be developed further with the aim of benefiting the Indian farmer? And my second question to you is, what is a suitable framework for data governance and regulation of the in the agri sector?
Thank you, Hemender, and good morning to all the co-panelists and all the participants. This session is about democratization of data. So in the first instance, we should have data to be democratized. Data should be available in a standard format and in an accessible format in a secure and safe manner in the first instance, before we can talk of higher things of life like democratization, etc., monetization. So the idea of IDEA is precisely that. How do you create a foundation layer that would enable people to either contribute to the data or access that data? So that is a foundational kind of work that is behind IDEA. So it's called, as Hemender said, the India Digital Ecosystem of Agriculture. It's an ecosystem that we are talking about and not a system. We have systems everywhere over the decades, starting with AgriSnet days and so on. But what is that super system which will enable those systems to interoperate? That is what we are. It's a standard-based ecosystem which consists of number of building blocks, a very few core building blocks, so to say, and many more, reference building blocks, so to say, or reference implementations, you can say. So together they try to create the kind of foundation where, on an end-to-end basis, you can provide a number of digital services. So that's what IDEA is. And agriculture, I would say, is a very classic example of, the data value chain, which starts with data, goes on to become information, and then information becomes knowledge, knowledge leads to intelligence. So the four stages of data, the four avatars of data can be only fully realized in reality if you have such a kind of foundation. So IDEA is, the philosophy of IDEA is precisely that. And why I'm saying that it's an ecosystem is not only that it is end-to-end, meaning the entire agricultural, cycle, crop cycle, etc., life cycle, from crop planning to, crop management to market and beyond. Second aspect is the organizational aspect of the ecosystem, which is agriculture is dealt with by both center, state, the private sector, and also the agri-tech industries, the innovators. So many players are there in this. So it's an ecosystem which is required. And another important base point I would mention about IDEA is it is based on a federated architecture and not a centralized architecture. With 150 plus million farmers and a large number of other actors in the fray, you can't have a unified or a uniform system or a centralized system there. So the essence is federated architecture. Data stays close to where it is generated and with the owners of the data, and others just dip into that as per the required permissions and privileges that they have, and the need that they have, and the value addition they would like to make. So that's net, a synoptic view of IDEA and what it intends to achieve. It would kind of make data more and more valuable and extract the essence of the value chain. In terms of the status, I must say that about this time last year, we were ready more or less with the architecture and the stack in fair amount of detail. And I'm fortunate to have Prashant also here in the panel who also worked on this. And unfortunately, because of COVID and post-COVID, some of the other developments which we are aware of in the agriculture sector, I mean, it's a little bit, stalemate in the situation. Hopefully, pretty soon it should be notified and for public comments and then go forward. That is answering your, Hemendra, your first question about idea and what is intention and status. Let me very briefly address the second point, which is data governance and regulation. I think we are the kind of environment is also shaping up in this space. I would broadly mention that data governance is for those who create and manage the data, and data regulation generally is done by the government, put in place by the government, and a regulator is also put in place. So that's the broad kind of a division. And data governance, there are a number of frameworks which need to be popularized and adopted widely, which basically looks at the quality of data, the security, the availability of data, and also enables to not only leverage the apparent value of data, face value of data, but the latent value, the potential value of data, which we don't know yet. So that is the purpose of data governance. If you keep your data, if you create your data in a standardized format and conforming to the principles, then not only the apparent data, but the latent value can be exploited or leveraged. So data governance is that, and data regulation part, I would say a few frameworks are emerging. One is the personal data protection, which is in the form of a bill before the parliament at this point and could become law in due course. That's one major initiative that we have, which looks at personal data. Second one, very important and significant development, non-personal data. A good part of the agricultural data comes into the non-personal data category. So the report of Dr. Chris Gopalakrishnan is the revised report is also with us. Probably it's a question of time before it takes its future shape. Third is, and last one is the DEPA, which is Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture, put out by Niti Aayog. So these three things together will form a very good, framework for us for, data protection and regulation. So this is net what I have to say on data governance and data protection.
Thank you, sir. This is very, very informative and useful. And thanks for bringing out the elements of ecosystem and the federated structure. And I think this personal and non-personal data with respect to agriculture is also very, very, very relevant. And I'm sure there are a lot of learnings around it, and we should probably discuss it more. So I'll come back to you, sir, with some more questions. Now, next, I want to go to Prashant. Prashant, first of all, we all want to learn what you're doing at Platform Commons Foundation. So please take a minute to let us know about your work since it's new. And my questions to you is, how an agri platform like AgriStack can be built in a more holistic way? What should be some of the very, very fundamental pillars for building such a platform? And how do we standardize this multiple data set given the fact they exist in a very, very scattered format?
Sure, lots of questions. Thank you. So I'll start with giving a little bit overview of Platform Commons Foundation, what we do. The initiative itself is about 9 years old. And it's just now that it has gone in the public forum. The idea that emerged 9 years back was platforms as a way of working were just coming up. Things like Amazon Marketplace were just 4 years old. I think Uber had just started and things like that. There was a realization that platforms per se can become very, very powerful tools. it was understood that digital access will only increase, and everybody sooner or later will be connected onto a digital highway down to the last farmer. It's a matter of time, a very short time from now. At the same time, what one was also observing is that in any platform, obviously platforms are about a lot of things, including being multi-sided, including bridging the information asymmetry and ton of stuff. But the question was that once a platform adds this value, who benefits from this value add? And often what one was seeing, that it is the platform owner who really wins. Neither the provider nor the consumer wins. So you would take a cab ride example and you would see, well, both the rider and when it comes to the finances, the rider complains about surcharge and the taxi driver complains about long working hours. Both feel fleeced, but the platform wins in some sense. A very strange thing, right? We have always learned that win-win is sustainable. Here it looks like lose-lose and a third party. So a few of us got together who had built platforms all our lives in that sense, and we softwares all our lives, and we said that can we build open source platforms so that we look at farmers being the true owners of the platform. You set the platform rules. It's just not just about being open source. I mean, open source, anybody can then install that platform. It's about what are the rules in which the platform will operate. So, which brings me, so that's what we've been doing. In late 2019, we started the process of taking AgriStack in the public space as a public platform. And we've just about finished that exercise as we speak. In doing so, we've realized a few things. First of all, which is coming to this thing, how do we build things in a more holistic way? What are those building blocks? The first, most important is what are the rules of the game? And I think in that the most important rule is the rule of inclusion. So when you are defining the value share that will occur on the agri-value chain, are you taking a fair view of what the farmer will make, what the logistics, what the stockist will make, what the logistics provider will make, what the retailer will make? And that's the true power of the platform, because if you are able to control this, then it is in your hand to set up a digital constitution, if I may, on that platform, which is inclusive in nature. The second point that one needs to consider is that when we design platforms, and today we are talking about data democratization, in some sense, the topic should be, what would data democratization? Data democratization should come out as a mechanism to achieve something else. So if we are saying that, are we looking at reducing wastage in India? Are we looking at increasing farmer income? Are we looking at having a reduction in price fluctuation of retail goods through the year? So, and then the question comes, how will platforms play a role? And then in that, what role data will play, and then what data democratization will do, because the data, even if it's not democratized, may still actually help you meet many of these goals. So I think the second important thing we've learned is that you build platforms which are use case driven. So you take a goal, you have a stakeholder, who will benefit from it. In our case, we said our sole stakeholder is the farmer. So we design use cases, we set the rules so that the farmer benefits from it. The third thing we realized is that, well, that's our view. There may be many other people who may have a lot of other interesting, good ideas for the ecosystem. And that brings the question of AgriStack. Right? The Agri platform and the AgriStack in some sense are different concepts. The platform is more functional in nature, is bringing people together, is offering you solutions. The stack is offering you capabilities to build your own solutions on top of it. So the third thing we learned and we've done is to build the whole tech infrastructure. That not only it gives you a functional platform where people can use and do their day-to-day things, it also gives you APIs and services and different constructs so that people can come and start building their solutions on top of the platform. And you've seen that when Salesforce did force.com in that architecture, how quickly it really became a force to reckon with. Who would have thought that, a CRM company could become so big? But because they managed to build an ecosystem around it, and JS spoke about interoperability, of course. Now, the interoperability, I think mentally we should think about interoperability not just as a technical context, but interoperability of people's interests. Technology we will figure out. We all know how to change the format of a data structure to integrate with the platform. But if there is if there are logistic providers, and if there are farmers, and if there are FPOs, and if there are large buyers and retailers and financiers and input suppliers, do their interests interoperate? So that's what I'd like to leave on the table. Whenever we think of the word interoperability, let's think about, do our interests interoperate? And that's the only way to make a platform work, because platform is an ecosystem. So if you get disjointed people whose interests are not aligned, you cannot build an ecosystem. Ecosystem by definition is something where things are in symbiosis with each other. So these are some of the thoughts. And I think somewhere around this, you spoke about the data. How do we standardize things like that? Yeah, it will come through technology. But if we look at interoperating of interests, the interoperation of the data standard for to talk to each other, so that interest is mutually fulfilled. That is the easiest thing. So I'll take a pause.
Thanks, Prashant. Wonderful insights, and your points around inclusion, democratization, interoperability are very, very, very insightful, and of course provocative in some sense. So, but extremely critical to discuss this out and build the architecture accordingly. And the challenge around inclusion, I totally agree. Despite all the good efforts for so many years, almost 70% of farmers still borrow from informal sources. And so the cost of capital there is like 2 to 5% a month, which is exorbitant. So I don't think any platform without inclusion at the core is going to succeed. So thanks for bringing that out. And of course, we should discuss more about it. Next, I'll go to Kriti. Kriti, we know about the ON work in the open digital ecosystem. You did a report on this, which also estimated the potential unlocking of value to the tune of $500 billion through ODEs, which is quite significant. So can you share some of the learning that you had, while you were doing this research and report, how those learnings can go into building an agri stack? So that's my first question to you. Second is also, if you can talk about, and I think JS talked about it, and so did Prashant, in terms of the partnerships required between the government, industries, and startups to develop this platform.
Yeah, thanks for the questions, Hemendra, and morning, everyone. I think before I get into the potential learnings, let me just take a second to explain, what we mean by the term open digital ecosystems, or ODEs, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So ODEs are open and secure digital platforms that enable a community of actors to unlock transformative solutions for society based on a robust governance framework. So as as Mr. Satyanarayana and Prashant have been talking about this as well, it's not only about a new way of building technology platforms, right? Focusing on enabling interoperability among disparate data sets and systems. But we also want to place a lot of emphasis on the non-tech layers, right? That is the governance and community engagement. And I'd like to underline this point about the governance framework, because this is an important learning, I feel, for ODs across sectors. But what this means in the context of the agri stack is how will government stakeholders, private sector players, and farmers interact with each other in a mutually beneficial way? Right, given the huge impact potential and the risks that are posed by any new and fast-paced sort of tech innovation. So in other words, what are the rules of engagement and what are the institutions that will uphold these rules? This needs to be part of the design blueprint of such a platform, not just the tech architecture. I think the second big learning from the ODE work is we need to create shared infrastructure in a manner that allows innovators to easily build on top, right? And this will require a push from the government, right? So for example, only the government has the ability to create sector defining standards and protocols. So just to give an example, the government could build data registries with a well-defined data exchange protocol that can allow players like SatSure, since we have Pradeep on the call, to easily access government data sets and augment the analytics that they're already doing. Another key learning, Hemendra, is there's a strong emphasis in the ODE approach on building in safeguards to protect the rights of individuals and prevent misuse of their data. Right? The way that data privacy is understood these days in the digital platforms that we all use in our day-to-day lives is actually to place the onus on us, the user. You've signed some consent document without really reading it, so your data is now free for all, right? Whereas in the ODE approach, what we're saying is the onus for protecting the consumer should lie on the service provider and the data collector, which is the government in this case, right? And these safeguards need to be built into the design in various ways. So Mr. Satyanarayana, spoke about the concept of this federated data architecture, which he's building into the Agri stack. And I think he also built it into the design of the digital health blueprint. And this is essentially one of the ways of guarding against the risk of data centralization and limiting, which entities have access to the most granular sort of farm and farmer level data and what can they then do with this data. So I'll stop there at the sort of high level 3 big learnings. But for those of you interested in getting into more depth on this, we've come up with a set of 15 guiding principles for each of these 3 layers of ODEs. That's the digital platform, the governance framework, and the community engagement piece, which you can access on the website opendigitalecosystems.net. Now, coming to your second question, Hemendra, on partnerships, I think what I would start with saying is that everybody has a role to play in an open digital ecosystem, which is why we use the term ecosystem rather than the term platform, recognizing the multiplicity of entities involved here. And the core infrastructure, though, has to be built by the government. No other actor has the incentive or more importantly, the institutional accountability to build a solution at scale that works equally well for all the stakeholders. The private sector then has to build applications on top of this infrastructure that unlock various innovative solutions for end users. And now for startups to be able to succeed in such ecosystems, the governance framework has to ensure that there's a level playing field for everyone, and sort of reduce the entry barriers for all sorts of players, including young startups. And so it's only when all of these stakeholders come together that we'll really see, truly vibrant open digital ecosystems unlocking the kind of value that you mentioned that we estimate in the report. So to give a quick example, there's a lot of discussion about mandis today. And we all know the important role that mandis play in, price discovery at the local level. And now we have a public digital infrastructure such as AgMarkNet, right, which tracks mandi prices across the country. But how does this information reach the farmer, who may be wanting to sell to new areas and might not be able to go to the website and access and download and process the data there? And in some areas where, say, ITC is active, they might be publishing mandi price data through the eChaupal platform. But how do we now unlock such a service at scale for farmers across the country? Right? It can be done by enabling startups to call AgMarkNet data through open APIs with ease, so that they can offer mandi prices along with various other sort of localized features like crop advisory in the local language, and various other features like that as value-added services to farmers at a minimal cost. And coming back to a second on, to my other point about creating a level playing field, and I think Prashant was also alluding to this, today we can either go to down the pathway that the big tech players have taken us down, right? Where the platform wins, where essentially large corporations have invested in creating these data monopolies. Or we can adopt the ODE approach where access to data is democratized. And young startups can also afford to develop new tech innovations, right? And this is where rather than, partnerships in the traditional sort of public-private partnership approach where you have, 2 entities and the partnership is defined by a contract, what we are talking about is a more sort of open, collaborative, multi-stakeholder mode of partnership, right? Which is enabled by things like open APIs, open standards, and open source software, which can sort of help distribute value from public data more effectively.
Okay. Thanks, Kriti. Very, very useful points. I think clearly the onus of building such platform, data collection, validation, authentication, I think that's clear that it lies with the government. But through partnership approach, the true value of the such platform or the ecosystem, as you mentioned, can be unlocked. I can tell you from a startup perspective, because I do work with many of them. I think 80% of their effort goes in data collection and just validation of those data points. And I don't think that's the right use of their talent and energy and the resources they have on hand. If they have a stack at hand, I think their ability to build APIs, as you rightly mentioned, is far. I think that's where the real value can be unlocked, and a lot of democratization of models like eChopal and multiple such models can happen much faster. And you can build multiple digital data layers. For example, this whole challenge is around soil nutrition. How do we create a soil nutrition map? We are one of the most water stressed countries. Can we create a water stress map? In context of agriculture. Can we create a mandi map? I think a lot of people don't know, but we do have 7,000 mandis, but the distribution is extremely, lopsided. Some regions have more mandis than they should, and some regions don't have a mandi, right? So I think, if we have the base database, I think building such APIs over and above it can really unlock value to the benefit of farmer. So thanks for bringing out the role of partnership and the need for partnership. With that, I'll go to Prateep. Prateep, you've done so much of work around satellite imagery applications. Of course, you work across sectors, but I know agriculture is close to your heart. What role spatial technology can play in building AgriStack?
Thanks, Hemendra sir. The role of geospatial technology is more like like one of the key components of the backbone of AgriStack. Because if you look at any and every data set that is required to improve the services to farmers, improve the services from financing or input side or post-harvest side, all of them have one thing in common: location context. In any data in the world can be spatial data. We speak of mandi prices, great. If we tell which mandi, which commodity, which price, and where is it located, that it makes the mandi itself as a spatial data set. When you geocode that mandi, and then you can kind of look at the distribution of the mandis in certain areas. You can look at the crop patterns in those areas, infrastructure. So any and every data set you speak of, is whether it's an agri or other sectors, you can make it as a spatial data set. Now, specific to agriculture, I feel that the AgriStack will have a lot of value addition from geospatial technologies in the following areas. One is credit. We all know that the farm credit in India, the product that banks sell is a KCC product, Kisan Credit Card, and it's based on the farmland asset. So as the government has been digitizing land records, it's all lying in silos. We don't have we still don't have the portal where one can go and access the farm details of a farmer by simply querying his name, his khasra number. So once AgriStack comes into place, where all these different databases are put together, the addition of, or the ease of access of such kind of farm details can help companies like us to directly create the history on the farm, the current aspects on that farm from an insurance perspective. If there is a damage, from a credit perspective, what is the repayment potential or credit default probability at the farm level. These kind of services makes the entire ecosystem of digital agriculture services much more stronger. Now, insurance and credit is one part, but as part of the project which JS sir mentioned previously, AI for AI, that we have been doing with government of Telangana and WEF, there has been a mapping out of the entire value chain across 4 stages of the farmer's life cycle. So we will see whether it is distribution of timely distribution of fertilizers, pesticides, timely collection of the produce from the farm, and the entire supply chain logistics, even the governance, from administrative governance perspective. Geospatial data has a role in each one of them. It's not the technology which will give an end-to-end benefit, but it's the core infrastructure, I believe, in the agri stack that would make it much stronger. So I'll not further kind of elaborate on this, because I think GS sir has this one wonderful slide in which we have mapped that out, and maybe if it's possible, GS sir could open that and we can discuss on the same.
Thanks. Yeah.
Hemendra, shall I go ahead? Yeah.
Yes, sir, please go ahead, sir. We look forward to that slide.
Yeah. So let me just introduce this. Do you see the full screen on this? Or, Hemendra,
yes, we see. Sir. Go ahead. We can see the.
Yeah. So this is the entire. We have been talking about agri value chain and data value chain, etc. So, and we are also talking of how to use the emerging technologies like AI and IoT and even satellite spatial data, etc. in an integrated manner. So, so this is the picture which shows actually the entire crop cycle, starting with the planning, the crop planning at the national and state levels and district levels, goes on to the actual, when the plant crop is on the ground, what kind of practices are required to derive the most out of it. Thirdly, once you are about to harvest or harvested, then how do you, from farm gate to fork, where do you sell, how do you sell, whether you want to sell it now or later, those decisions and the logistics, etc. And finally, the data which underlies, which is the bedrock of all these activities. How do you govern the data? How do you see that it is in a standard format and accessible? So this is the whole what we have done in the last 4 months with a group of about 70 members in 4 working groups, most of which members also are from startup community. They brainstormed over the various values, along this chain. And for instance, I'll just only illustrate that in the 4 stages, what is the kind of value we are trying to seek or leverage or extract. So the one on top are about 11, frameworks which are at a mega level, enablers for things to happen. And the ones in the bottom, navy blue, are the use cases. I think I saw a question from the participants that, what's the use case? How do you illustrate a use case? It is a question of, 24 use cases here. As you can see, 11 frameworks and 24 pilots are use cases we have demonstrated here on this slide. Just to take, how do you plan at the national level, what kind of crops are required across the country, keeping in view the food security and nutrition security, the import substitution, best value for the farmer. Keeping that in view, what kind of modeling should be there at the national level, and also at the farmer level. He should, before he goes into the season, Kharif season or Rabi season, what crop is the best suitable for him from multiple perspectives. And then a number of use cases downstairs you can see here, which can be actually which pick up the framework and demonstrate it in a pointed use case and demonstrate the value. It is intended to do this over 4 seasons, that is Kharif Rabi over 2 years, so that it's a continuously improving kind of a model, and it's a feasible model from multiple angles. Similarly, when the crop is on the ground, on the field, on the farm, smart farming as a service and integrated nutrient management and overall crop health management are the frameworks, and a number of 7 to 8, how do you predict pests and how do you counterattack them in advance and so on, and smart irrigation and insurance and credit and so on. And third is where most of the value realization also happens here in this space. Prashant was also indicated, is the farmer getting his right share of the rupee? This is where farm gate to fork is about market intelligence, quality and traceability and logistics, and a number of use cases around that. But last but not least is the data part, which is in fact the theme of this particular session as well, incidentally. How do you see that the data is exchanged in a manner that is fair and reasonable to everyone, all the players? So it's what we're calling it as a data marketplace, which gives due value to the owners and the processors of data in accordance with the contribution that they make to the data. So some data could be free, the data that could be generated by the government, some could be priced for a period of time. Second is, we talked a lot about standards. While we have standards in health, like FHIR, Fast Health Interoperability Resources. In a like manner, we have created FAIR, Fast Agriculture Interoperability Resources, which is a standard way of expressing any data element. Like FHIR has been there for 2 decades, HL7 and all. So on same lines, we have proposed FAIR. And just like EHR, Electronic Health Record, we proposed EFR, like Electronic Farm Record. So this is going to be revolutionizing the entire data spectrum here, and a few use cases here. So net-net, what I'm saying is this compendium of these 11 frameworks and 24 pilots will be due for release sometime in April. And post that, it's a question of all the startups looking at it. What are the opportunities? How do we leverage this, etc. And it's an exciting time to be in at this point of time. Thank you.
Thanks. It's extremely comprehensive, and I'm sure startups would look up to this, as in when it is released. So before I go to Prashant again, one question to you. You mentioned about the health stack, and of course there are other public platforms like India Stack. What are some of the learning that we have now from those stacks which are already operational for AgriStack? What are some do's and don'ts which we can learn from them?
Yeah, I think in terms of an ecosystem approach and a stack approach, one can quote Aadhaar as the best and largest example here, which created an ecosystem of identities. Then we have GSTN, we have UPI, we have DigiLocker, which have emerged over a period. And in the pipeline, we have at least 3 more with which I am associated. One is the IDEA, which I described before, India Digital Ecosystem of Agriculture. Another one is called NDR, National Digital Education Architecture, which is also an ecosystem approach. Is in the shape. Final report is almost around the corner now. And also one in the welfare segment, for inclusion of disadvantaged communities of the society. So these are in the making. But just answering your point directly from the lessons, and also health, as you know, which is under implementation already, National Digital Health Mission. So the lessons, common points I would say would be 3 topmost. There are many, but I would mention only 3. First one, reiterating the unquestionable need for federated architecture. That is a lesson which is becoming stronger and stronger with each of these sectors. Second one is a question of enable versus build. The temptation is, once you have the architecture, we'll try, governments and others tend to go and build it themselves. No. Enable rather than build. Build only the minimal critical core, which could be only 10%, and leave 90% to the entrepreneurs and private sector to leverage. Is second lesson is that. Then sustainability, viability, all those come from that enterprise angle. And the third one is a multi-stakeholder approach in the design and development. At each stage, you go on consulting, publishing what you are thinking, and then collectively you make it collectively, and it'll be a stronger model. So these 3 lessons. At the end of the day, we need capacity. We need to build capacity of several types in this, and leadership, of course. These are the lessons, I would say.
Well, I think good to say there are so many commonalities across platforms. So that's really the beauty of platforms. How we can learn from each different platforms, altogether different sectors. So that's great. Prashant, coming to you, this whole big elephant in the room, the privacy issue. Is it overrated when it comes to agriculture? Any views on this?
Yeah, definitely. You cannot ask me a question and not expect views, huh?
So that's good to listen.
See, I think the issue is not per se the data privacy. The issue is what will you do with the data? I used to think earlier that the issue is data monetization, but it's not even that. There's a little bit of that which is psychological. So for example, so let's say I am a startup and I use some of this democratically available data to build $1 billion business. Now, obviously I'll be very happy. Now, somebody might say that, of this $1 billion, since the data has come from the farmer, it needs to go, this monetization of it needs to go back to the farmer in some sense. And we say, yeah, divided by 150 million farmers, that's $6 a piece. And that actually the farmer is not caring about it today. Not saying that I need that $6. It's much like you look at, say, some of the social media platforms today. You take their valuation or their market cap, you divide by the number of users. It's a very small number, $10, $20, $30 or whatever. The issue that comes is, are you using my data against me? Are you using my data to disenfranchise me from this whole value sharing? So if you had data about a particular cropping pattern, quality, grain, etc., through a lot of IoT devices or field operations and image recognition coming in, will you use that data to play with the commodities market, depending on who you are, in a manner that I will be at a severe disadvantage in the coming year? If you had data about the quality of wheat growth in a cluster of 10 blocks, will you use that to drive a price down by doing very, very precise buying? So now somebody might say, no, why will, as a buyer, I will buy, I have data, I will buy from the best farm and I will go there first and I will suck up all the inventory. So the real question to ask is that, are we going to be using the farmer data to create a further exclusion of the farmer's participation in the value? Will we take a predatory approach? Now, and predator doesn't have to be big, right? A team of small ants will strip off, a dead carcass in 10 minutes. So you can be 1,000 or 10,000 startups, and each of them you may extract value for your own selves using that data and leave the farmer stripped bare further than what the farmer is already today. You don't need to be a corporate giant to do that. So the question is that, are we, and that goes down to the whole governance and everything, right? What are those use cases? For whom are we looking to create value? Of course, if I'm working hard, I will say I will create value for myself. It's fair. If a startup is working, they'll say, but are you exclusively creating value for yourself? Or are you using my data, me being the farmer, my data, my participation on the platform, are you using that to generate value for me? That's the question. So what I would like to leave on the table is that if you look at it purely from take a complete step back from all of the micro discussions, and one of the biggest problems of the farmer distress, and linked to that in general is the extreme poverty in India, is market remuneration for the farmer. As a basic fundamental thing. Are we going to say that to help the farmer get a higher price is the sole charter of a collective of platforms? Now, obviously, it's a win-win. If I'm going to get you something higher, then I will also make money. That's fair. But when you take the conversation to that space, which is the elephant in the room is not the data privacy. The whale in the room, and it's so big that we think it's a smooth black surface. It's a wall. So the the elephant in room is really the price realization, post-production. A lot of our thinking also goes to, sell an input or sell a service or sell an advisory or sell a new seed or sell something to the farmer through all this information. In the post-production space, are we happy to, can we, converse with some degree of honesty about the price remuneration to the farmer? And then this question becomes completely redundant. Farmer will happily hand over your data to say, man, create something of value for me using my data. Don't outcast me further using my data. So I think that's the issue.
No, absolutely. I think very well put. I think it's, I think whether you are creating value for yourself or for the farmer, I think that's the core of it. So,
and especially if you are, and see, that is true. See, it's a free world. Anybody can create value for themselves. Just don't do it using my data. Don't use my data as a stick to beat me. That's the issue, not the privacy. That's the issue.
Thanks, Prashant. I think that's a fair view on this important topic. Kriti, I'll come to you. And a related point is on this whole platform being open source. How do you see that happening? At what stage it should become open source? What components need to be open source? What component need not be? And as JS said, for some data, probably it's free for everyone. For some data, you have to pay for it. Of course, it will evolve. But any views from you on this topic?
Yeah, so one of the key words in open digital ecosystems is, of course, open, which refers to not only open source software, but also open APIs, open standards, and this whole open culture of collaboration. Now, I think there are many kind of misconceptions about open source software, which I think need to be dispelled, especially when it comes to government or public sector technology, right? There are questions asked about whether open source is secure. If it's open source, does that mean it's not as secure? How will it be maintained if it's being built by this dispersed network of volunteer developers and things like that? And I would actually urge everyone to read a new report that's recently been released by Civic Data Lab on the state of free and open source software in India, which really helps demystify this space and bust some of these myths, including in the context of government or public sector tech platforms. And in my opinion, there are many benefits to be realized if AgriStack is made truly open source, and the benefits are not just for startups but pretty much for all the actors in the ecosystem, right? So firstly, it will create a lot more trust and transparency. If people can see the source code and understand what the data is being used for, who has access to what, right? Secondly, I think it would help with the whole idea of democratizing innovation, right? Not only startups, but literally any developers can potentially build solutions on top of the core digital platform more easily. Thirdly, I think from the government's point of view, it would actually reduce vendor dependency. So, it would free the government from being dependent on any one tech vendor who has built the platform. And I think another thing that it can do is sort of accelerate localization, right? So all of the digital services that are being enabled by the platform, can potentially be more easily integrated with Indian language translation tools, which is something that's really critical if we expect these services to reach, farmers across the country. So I think it's not really a matter of at which stage or which component should be open source. I think if we sort of understand what the benefits are and dispel some of the myths around open source, then automatically we'll come to the realization that the source code should be open in any government technology that's being built.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I think definitely open source and need a lot of demystification. I think all of us have our own perceptions since it's still evolving. So thanks, and I think that reference to report is useful. I think we are in the last 5 minutes, so probably I'll go to Prateep one more time. Prateep, continuing with this open source theme, you recently launched Sparta, right? An open source platform. Just share what's your philosophy and how do you see the partnership happening with Sparta coming into place?
Thanks, Hemendra, for highlighting that. So Sparta is an open data platform. Open source is where you provide the source code. Open data is where you hold the source code, but you provide the data openly. And we are seeing very interesting kind of partnerships, not just in agriculture, but people who are policy researchers, companies who are in the climate financing space, etc., who have not only expressed interest but are consuming the APIs already. So there is a lot of small innovations that are happening, things that we would otherwise take, let's say, 10 meetings in different cities to, here, because the data is open, people are exploring themselves, they are then coming back to us, and it's essentially increasing the scale at which the innovations based on such kind of data is being unlocked. It's still early stage, I would say, and we have approximately now 82 enterprise partners, some of them pretty well-known names, and the friction to adopt data is reducing, because people don't have to pay for it, especially from a POC perspective. And in organizations, small or large, getting budgets for doing POC is like a big headache, and people usually have that issue, which we are today facilitating them to do their internal innovation using quality data, using easy to access data through the APIs, and co-collaborate with us. So I believe that co-innovation ecosystem could be very well built through such open source and open data platforms. Sparta is a step keeping geospatial data to be opened up properly, and it is also very much in line with how the government is approaching this. Government also has so much of soil data, etc., etc. And as more and more of these data sets become open, we will bring them onto Sparta as well, because it serves a certain kind of different set of applications, for people, where the government database AgriStack becomes the central data repository, and there will be application data repository like Sparta. So that's how we envision it. I hope this gives a picture. So.
Yeah, thanks Pradeep. No, thanks for
hi everyone. There are a few questions which I've put in the chat box. Would you like to take that up in next
I'll
2
take
minutes?
I'll take that up. I know we have 3 minutes to go. Maybe I'll take 1 or 2 of them.
Sure.
So the one question is, what is the biggest risk to data governance today? Are the privacy bills sufficient to address them? JS, do you want to take this up?
I think let me be very short. It's a good beginning to have, this personal data as well as non-personal data. It's a good way to begin, I would say, in short. Yeah.
Okay. Prashant, maybe you can take the next question. Could you give an example of interportability of stakeholders in the agri value chain, since we talked about it?
Yeah, so let's take a very simple example. Let's say there is a startup who is built a solution for soil health. So some IoT based thing or some low cost soil toolkit, etc. And now I have my soil test results. Now there is another organization who's built algorithms to advise farmers on what to grow. And the soil test result is going to be an input into that advisory. Now, and these are completely two different organizations, different data centers, different applications. If we can standardize the structure of the soil test report, much like your blood test report is standardized, and therefore a pathology does it, but a doctor is able to understand them. Once you standardize that, data can then flow from one of these solutions into another through some sort of an interoperability framework, bus, whatever. And then the whole industry now has a common vocabulary of what a soil test result looks like. And people can then innovate based on whatever it means to them. So that's one very quick example. But there are tons of examples about.
Sure. I wish we had more time. It's an engaging discussion, and like questions are pouring in from the audience. Unfortunately, I think it's 11:29, and I'm told we have a hard stop at 11:30. So I'm sorry for not taking some of the very, very interesting questions. I hope we can address them offline. So I take this opportunity to thank all the panelists, JS sir, Prashant, Pradeep, and Kriti, for wonderful insights and a very, very thought-provoking discussion. I hope we have more of these discussions as we are building into AgriStack. So thanks to all of you, and thanks to the Wilgrow team for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you, Hemendra. Thank you, Satyanarayan sir, Pradeep, Prashant, and Kriti for sharing your insights on this topic with us. It was such a delight to be part of this session, and unfortunately, we couldn't pick up a lot of questions. But to the audience, if you want to get in touch with any of the panelists, you can do so via the Hubilo platform directly. Coming up next, we have sessions around awareness and accessibility of health for underserved women, challenges and innovation opportunities, and a masterclass on tech solutions for incubators. You can also meet Harshit and Anvita from Kalari Capital and Arvind from Deepak Fertilizers in the networking lounges. Thanks to all of you who joined us, and see you again very soon. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.